He said he was flying to Seattle for work, but by Sunday afternoon, she found him in Buckhead, cradling a baby she never knew existed. What do you do when the man you love doesn't lie, but simply hides the truth that changes everything? This story isn't about infidelity. It's about silence. It's about trust betrayed not by cheating, but by withholding the most life-altering truth a man could carry. If you've ever believed someone so deeply, only to realize they were holding something back, something that changes your place in their world, this story is for you. Like, share, comment, and stay to the end, because this isn't about a secret child. It's about what a woman chooses when she's finally told the whole truth. Taylor Monroe had built a life around calm. No chaos, no noise. As an interior designer in Atlanta's creative circle, her joy came from space. Negative space, clean lines, quiet homes that felt like deep inhales. She wasn't drawn to money. She didn't chase fame. She chased peace. And in Callan Durrell, she thought she'd found it. They met at an art gala she helped redesign. Callan wasn't on the guest list, but he showed up in dark clothes, no +1, and barely said a word. While everyone else clinked champagne glasses and name-dropped board seats, he stood quietly near. A piece Taylor had curated, a framed installation of broken glass stitched with gold leaf. She found him staring at it for a full minute. "You see something wrong with it?" she had asked, genuinely curious. "No," he said. "I think whoever made this understands damage." That was the first time she heard his voice, low, measured, unaffected. From that moment, Callan pursued her gently, not through grand gestures, but small acts. A morning coffee placed on her office stoop. A note left in her glove box that read, "Don't forget the sunrise exists for you too." He never rushed her, never asked for more than she could give. By month 6, they were in rhythm. By month 12, she had his second apartment key. By month 18, he was her safest place to land. But even safety has shadows. And Taylor had taught herself not to stare too long into them. Taylor Monroe didn't care much for small talk or flashy men. She liked people who moved with intention, who spoke less but noticed more. That's why she never saw herself falling for a CEO. And definitely not one like Callan Durrell. He wasn't loud, wasn't magnetic. He moved through rooms like he didn't need them. The night they met, she wasn't even trying to impress. Her feet hurt from standing in heels for hours at the art museum gala she helped design, and she'd just slipped outside to check her email when she saw him. Alone, at the edge of the event, studying a fractured glass sculpture stitched together with veins of gold. The piece was symbolic, recovery, brokenness, beauty in imperfection, but most guests hadn't paid attention. He did. "You see something wrong with it?" she asked, sipping water from a plastic cup. Callan turned, looked directly at her. "No. I think it was made by someone who doesn't flinch when things fall apart." She didn't realize it then, but that was his introduction, not just to her, but to the way he moved through life. Observant, careful, quietly honest. It took him 3 weeks to ask her out, and when he did, he sent a handwritten note to her design office. No signature, no time, just an address and a single line. "If you want something calm, I'm here." Their first date wasn't a dinner. It was a bookstore, a used one. No music, no bar, just rows of dusty shelves and quiet chairs. He watched what she reached for, noticed when her eyes lingered on a worn book about Japanese architecture, bought it without her seeing, left it on her apartment doorstep the next morning. Callan didn't chase attention. He anticipated what mattered. As the months passed, Taylor found herself adjusting. Not because he asked her to, but because his rhythm was peaceful. He never raised his voice, never overpromised, never pressured her for answers about her past. She found herself letting him into corners of her life she'd closed off for years. The Sunday calls with her older brother in D.C., the sketches of her childhood home she kept in a box, the notebook where she listed fears she was still trying to outgrow. And Callan never judged. He listened, wrote down things she said like they were plans to honor. When she confessed she hated surprise gifts, he stopped. When she told him she never liked being called babe, he switched to Tay. When she said she feared being a placeholder, someone men loved until their real life began, he looked at her and said, "You're the first real thing I've ever let in." She believed him. Callan was not a man who gave much away. She didn't know what his parents did. He never talked about past relationships. His phone always had 2 numbers, but he said it was for work separation. She respected that. They didn't fight often, and when they did, it was over things that ended with mutual silence, not slammed doors. Taylor loved that about them. They were grown, not dramatic, not flashy, real. But sometimes, real left questions unanswered, like the time he cancelled a trip to meet her brother without explanation, or when she saw an unfamiliar female name flash on his second phone while they were watching a movie. He said it was a board member. She didn't ask again. She didn't want to be that woman, and she had no reason not to trust him. Not then. 18 months in, Callan started sleeping over more. He stocked her fridge with things she liked: oat milk, kiwi, almond butter. She started keeping an extra toothbrush for him. They split the morning coffee duties. She ironed his dress shirts when he was running late. He learned how she liked her eggs. They were building something. She felt it. The kind of slow, true love people write about but rarely wait for. One Sunday morning, she rolled over in bed and asked, "When are we going to talk about next steps?" He was buttoning his shirt, halfway out the door for a board meeting. Callan paused, glanced over, and said, "Soon, when it calms down." She didn't press. She knew the look in his eyes, focused but not dismissive. He always kept his word, or so she thought. The week he left for Seattle felt like any other. He said it would be 3 days, some investor pitch and site visit. He didn't like flying for short trips, but the company required his presence. Taylor helped him pack. She folded his black t-shirts the way he liked, stacked tight with one inside out to keep the collar flat. He kissed her on the cheek, pulled her close, and whispered, "Be kind to yourself while I'm gone." She held that sentence like a love letter. After he left, she spent the first evening reorganizing their shared drawer. The second night, she meal prepped and drafted new design proposals. By the third, she missed him, but she didn't panic. He always texted back, until he didn't. Sunday, 3:14 p.m., her phone buzzed. It was her friend, Kellis. Is Callan in town?" Photo attached. Taylor opened it, expecting some casual screenshot from social media, but her hands stilled. The photo was from a rooftop party in Buckhead. Someone in the background had caught a blurry but unmistakable silhouette, tall, lean, navy hoodie, soft smile. It was Callan, and in his arms was a baby. At first, Taylor assumed it was a mistake. A cousin, maybe, friend's child. But then she noticed the look in his eyes. Not the look of a man entertaining a stranger's child. The look of someone who knew how to cradle them. Gentle, familiar, protective. Her throat dried. She sat down. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she typed. "Taylor, you said you were in Seattle. You okay?" No response. She checked the timestamp on the photo. It was from 2 hours ago. Taylor didn't text again. She stared at the photo until the screen dimmed. She didn't cry. She didn't move. Her body went still. The kind of stillness that signaled the end of something you didn't want to name yet. The first thought that crossed her mind wasn't he cheated. It was worse. It was, he has a life I was never part of. By the time night fell, Taylor still hadn't heard from Callan. No layover update, no voicemail, no excuses. Only the haunting silence of her phone screen and the baby's sleepy face frozen in that single image. She couldn't stop looking at it, not because she wanted to, but because her brain couldn't make peace with it. The baby looked content in his arms, comfortable, familiar. It wasn't the kind of hold someone gives a stranger's child. It was intimate, practiced, the way Callan used to hold her after a long day, when he didn't say much, but his silence felt safe. Now, that silence felt like a wall. and for the first time in 2 years, she didn't know which side of it she stood on. She didn't sleep that night, didn't eat, didn't call her brother, didn't cry. She just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo on loop, her thumb swiping up and down like it could change what she saw if she tried hard enough. The next morning, she showered, got dressed, brushed her curls back, put on makeup, even though she wasn't going anywhere. Then she picked up her keys, slid her phone into her bag, and drove. Buckhead always made her feel like she didn't belong. Valet parking, glass towers, the kind of wealth that didn't breathe. But she didn't care today. She parked a block away from the building her friend had mentioned. It was the kind of flashy residential high-rise Callan would have rolled his eyes at. Too loud, too branded, too visible, which made it all the more confusing that he was there. She turned off the engine and waited. At exactly 9:37 a.m., a black SUV pulled up. Her breath stalled. He stepped out, hoodie, joggers, same black sneakers he wore the day he left. In his arms was the baby. Same curls, same blanket. This wasn't a one-time photo. This was real. Callan adjusted the baby gently, patting his back with rhythmic ease. The boy's tiny hand curled around the edge of his hoodie. He murmured something, soft, soothing, and kissed the child's forehead like he'd done it 100 times before. Taylor's chest caved in. She stepped out of her car, let her heels hit the pavement with a sound he couldn't ignore. Callan turned. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, his entire expression changed. "Taylor," he said softly, like her name was the first thing he hadn't rehearsed. She didn't move closer, just stood still, 20 feet away, hands at her sides. She looked at the baby, then at him. "Is he yours?" Her voice didn't crack. It didn't shake. It simply asked. Callan hesitated for half a breath. Then, yes. The answer didn't surprise her, but it landed like a quiet earthquake. He didn't deny, didn't explain, didn't deflect. She looked at the baby again, tiny, perfect, resting against the chest she used to fall asleep on. "And you weren't going to tell me?" Callan didn't reply. His silence confirmed the betrayal. Not the child, the lie of omission. Taylor nodded once. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't ask anything else. She turned and walked away. He didn't stop her. And that, more than anything, tore her open. The drive home felt like static. She couldn't remember the stoplights, the turns, or if her radio had played at all. When she parked in front of her building, she sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes before moving. Everything in her apartment was exactly as she left it, but she wasn't the same. Her hands were steady, her breath even, but her heart was sorting through something she didn't yet have words for. The next 3 days were silent. No knock at the door, no text, no apology. Until Thursday evening. There was a soft knock just after 7 p.m. She opened it. Callan stood there. No hoodie, no child, just him. He held nothing, not even flowers. She stepped aside. Barely. Enough to let him in, but not enough to say he was welcome. He entered, quiet as always. She crossed her arms and waited. He didn't sit, didn't pace. He stood in the middle of her living room, looked at her directly, and spoke. His name is Avan. The name hit her first, not because it was beautiful, but because it meant he'd given the child a place, a future, a claim. "He's mine," Callan continued, "from someone I met during a rough season. We weren't in a relationship. It was months before you and I got serious." Taylor said nothing. She didn't tell me she was pregnant, not until after he was born. She didn't want to keep him. She left him at my assistant's apartment with a note and a bag. His voice remained level, but there was a crack in his stare, the kind of ache that men like Callan rarely showed. "I didn't tell you because I didn't know how to. I didn't want to lose what we had. And I knew you wanted family the right way." She blinked slowly. "I wanted time to sort it all, before I dragged you into it." Taylor tilted her head, the corner of her mouth lifting, but not in amusement. "You didn't drag me," she said. "You locked me out." Callan flinched, just barely, but it was there. He didn't try to argue. He just nodded. I wasn't ashamed of him, he added. I was ashamed of how I handled you. That, she believed. He'd never been careless with her. Not until this. She stared at him for a long time, then asked the only question she hadn't yet dared. Why were you at that rooftop? He exhaled. A friend from the board offered his place for a photo shoot. I needed a few pictures with Avon. For custody paperwork. Taylor's brow furrowed. Custody. Callan nodded. I'm filing for full custody. His mother's gone, disconnected. I didn't want him to grow up with gaps and no one to protect him. That landed differently. It didn't undo what he'd kept from her. But it told her something deeper. This man hadn't checked out. He'd checked in, just not with her. She didn't cry, didn't ask for more. She studied his face, the softness under the stubble, the dark circles under his eyes, the guilt in his posture. She could feel how tired he was, not from work, but from carrying two lives, the one he lived and the one he kept from her. And still, she loved him, which made it worse. After a long pause, she asked quietly, "What was his name again?" Callan swallowed. "Avon," she nodded, then stepped aside, pointing toward the door. Callan didn't beg. He just walked past her, stopped once, then left, and again. She didn't stop him. That night, she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The fan rotated above her. The world outside moved on, but something in her had shifted. She didn't hate him. She didn't hate the child. She didn't even hate the silence that cracked their relationship. What she hated was not being trusted, because if he had told her, she would have stayed. 3 days passed after that conversation, and still, Taylor couldn't find her footing. She wasn't broken. She wasn't bitter. She was blank. Her thoughts were organized, but her feelings weren't. She could function, work, cook, respond to emails, but inside her chest, something had frozen. A part of her heart she couldn't access yet. She kept remembering his hands, not holding her, holding the baby, so gently, so instinctively, as if that little boy had rewritten Callan's capacity to love. And the worst part was, she didn't hate that. She hated that she hadn't been told, that she hadn't been given the chance to step into that chapter willingly, because she would have. She would have accepted the child. She knew that about herself. But she would have needed the truth. She would have needed time. That Saturday, she met her friend Kellis at a rooftop cafe in Inman Park. Kellis had been quiet since the day she sent the photo. Now, she slid an iced coffee across the table and said, "So, what did he say?" Taylor took a sip before answering, "That he didn't tell me because he thought I'd leave." Kellis raised an eyebrow. "And did you?" Taylor looked out at the skyline. It was quiet today. No helicopters, no traffic buzz, just that faint hum of weekend peace. "I didn't slam the door," she said, "but I didn't stay either." Kellis nodded slowly. "It's not the baby, is it?" "No," Taylor said. "It's never been the baby." She paused, pressing her lips together. "It's the silence. It's realizing he looked me in the eye every morning and said nothing while everything in his world changed." Kellis leaned back in her chair. "You don't have to make a decision now." "I already did," Taylor replied. "I'm giving myself space." Later that night, she opened her sketchbook. Not for work, not for design briefs, just for herself. She sketched a small apartment. Hers, one couch, a soft rug, one crib. Then she erased the crib. She stared at the empty space for a long time. Sunday afternoon, she took a walk through Piedmont Park, alone, without headphones, just listening to people around her, laughter, stroller wheels, dogs barking. It used to make her feel like life was happening. Now, she wondered how much of it was true. How many couples were walking next to each other while hiding things? How many parents looked tired because of babies they never expected but now couldn't live without? How many people were pretending to be okay so the other person didn't break? At home, she reheated leftover pasta. Halfway through her meal, she opened her phone and clicked back on the photo. Again, The image from last week. Callan. Hoodie. Baby. She zoomed in. The child's face was softer than she remembered. Peaceful. And his hand, the way it held Callan's hoodie, made her breath catch. It was the kind of grasp babies give when they're afraid you'll let go. And Callan didn't look afraid. He looked like he belonged there. A voice behind her said, "If you're going to keep staring at that photo, you might as well print it." Taylor nearly dropped her fork. She turned. Her brother stood at the threshold of her living room, holding up the spare key she gave him years ago. "Liam told me you hadn't called him all week, so I figured you were either dead or emotionally torched." Taylor sighed. "I should change the locks." He dropped his bag, walked over, and plopped onto the couch. "Talk to me." So she did. She told him everything. Every detail. The trip to Buckhead. The baby. The confrontation. The silence. The visit. The name. Yvonne. Her brother didn't interrupt. When she finished, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "You still love him." She blinked. "That's not the point. But it's the truth." Taylor stood and walked to the sink. She needed to rinse her plate before her heart cracked. He called after her, "You can forgive someone and still leave." She didn't answer. She didn't want to admit that her heart had already forgiven Callan. It was her mind that couldn't. That night, she sat by her bedroom window and journaled. She hadn't done that in years. She wrote, "I'm not angry at the baby. I'm angry I didn't get to choose the moment my life changed. I'm angry I had to find out through a photo, not his mouth. But most of all, I'm afraid, because I still want to be in this story. And I don't know if that makes me foolish or brave." Monday morning, she went back to work. Her client was a pediatric therapy center being redesigned for neurodivergent children. She'd chosen soft lights, tactile walls, quiet color palettes, spaces that invited calm, not noise. It made her feel grounded again, creating safe spaces when her own had been shaken. Later that evening, she was reviewing carpet samples when her phone vibrated. It was a text from Callan. Avon had his first checkup today. He didn't cry once. Attached, a blurry picture of the baby in a car seat, smiling with 2 tiny teeth poking through. Taylor stared at the photo for a long time, then typed, "He looks calm. Like you." She didn't say more. Callan replied, "That's because you were the only calm thing I ever knew." She locked her phone and didn't respond. But she smiled. The next morning, a package arrived at her office. No note, no card. Inside was a copy of the very first book Callan had bought her at the bookstore. But this time, it was the children's edition. Illustrated, hand-bound, signed for Yvonne. From someone who knows how to see beauty in broken things. Taylor closed the cover, held it to her chest. Maybe this wasn't the end. But it wasn't the beginning either. It was something in between. And sometimes, that's where the truest stories lived. Taylor didn't reply to Callan's text. She let it sit there, not unread but unanswered. She'd already said what mattered the night he came to explain. She wasn't punishing him. She was protecting herself. Because what he offered now, updates, photos, children's books, it felt like a late invitation to a story she was never allowed to help write. Still, she didn't delete the messages. She read them when it was quiet. She saved the photo of Yvonne, not because she forgave everything, but because she didn't want to forget how human it all was. That Wednesday she had a meeting with a new client, a small black-owned bakery expanding its location near Decatur. The owner, a sharp woman in her 50s named Margot, reminded Taylor of her mother, structured, opinionated, and quietly soft in the way she greeted her delivery drivers by name. After the walk through, Margot pulled her aside. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked. "You're present, but your eyes feel like they're somewhere else." Taylor smiled gently. "I'm fine." Margot tilted her head. "Fine is code for, I'm trying not to bleed in front of people." Taylor swallowed. That was too accurate. She didn't respond. Margot nodded and handed her a wrapped muffin. "Almond pistachio. Eat before 3 or it turns dry." That small act felt heavier than it should have. Back at home, Taylor finally opened the note Callan had left behind the night he came to confess. It was folded inside the last book he'd returned to her bookshelf. She hadn't touched it until now. It read, "Tay, I never wanted to lose the version of me that existed when I was with you. But I also couldn't pretend that version could survive without telling you the truth. If I handled this wrong, and I know I did, it's not because I didn't care, it's because I cared too much, and I panicked. You've always been steadier than me. If there's still a chance, I'll wait until you're ready. Either way, he knows your name, Callan." She closed the note, didn't fold it back, didn't throw it away. She placed it on her desk, visible, present, real. A few days later, Kellis texted again. He was at the pediatric center on Grant with the baby, looked exhausted, but like, something's different. He smiled at the receptionist. Taylor blinked. Callan rarely smiled in public. She responded simply, "He's learning." The following morning, she saw Avon for the second time, unexpectedly. She had just parked outside a boutique plant shop to pick up a gift for her assistant. His birthday when she turned and saw Callan about to lift Avon from his car seat. For a second, she froze. He didn't see her. She could have walked away, slipped inside unnoticed. But instead, she exhaled, walked forward, and stopped beside his vehicle. He looked up mid-motion. Surprise flickered across his face, but he didn't rush to speak. Avon let out a soft coo. Taylor bent down slightly and looked at him. His eyes were bigger now, his cheeks fuller. He studied her like he knew her voice from somewhere. "You talk about me," she said quietly, without looking at Callan. "Every day," Callan replied. She nodded. "What's his middle name?" Callan's voice was steady. "Malachi." Taylor blinked slowly. "Hopeful," Callan nodded. "Because that's what he gave me. A second beginning I didn't know I needed." She looked at the baby again. "He has your eyes," she said. Callan glanced down. "That's the part I don't know how to protect yet." They didn't talk long. A minute, maybe two. But before she left, she reached into her bag, pulled out a small toy keyring she'd bought. On impulse at the register the week before, soft rubber, chew-safe, bright colors. She handed it to Callan. "Don't let him chew the red one." The paint chips. Callan didn't say thank you. He just looked at her like he wanted to, and she turned, walked into the shop, and didn't look back. But that was the first night she slept fully. No photo scrolling, no numb spiraling. Sunday morning, she found herself at her favorite coffee shop, the one with the corner booth by the windows. She brought a book but didn't open it. She kept thinking about Callan's voice, the note, Avon's soft stare, the way her body hadn't rejected the moment. She hadn't run. She didn't feel broken anymore, just cautious. But underneath the caution, there was warmth. Something still flickering. A shadow fell across her table. She looked up. Callan stood there, holding a small paper cup. He didn't sit. Vanilla oat milk. 2 pumps. No whip. She stared at the cup. "You remember?" "I remember everything." She didn't take the drink. But she also didn't tell him to leave. He placed it gently in front of her. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "But if you ever feel like seeing him again, or even just walking with us, I'd be honored." She stared at him. Callan had always been calm, but now there was something softer beneath the calm, humility. She nodded once. No promises, just possibility. He understood. He stepped back. "Enjoy your Sunday." He didn't linger. He left the cup. And her. But this time, something stayed behind. That night, Taylor stared at her ceiling again. Same fan. Same hum. But this time, her mind wasn't racing. She didn't know what would come next. But she knew this. Sometimes, people don't break your trust by betraying you. Sometimes, they break it by thinking you weren't strong enough to carry the truth with them. And now, Callan wasn't just telling the truth. He was living it. Out loud. No hiding. No second phone. No separate worlds. And if he kept doing that, She wasn't sure she'd keep walking away. Monday morning arrived with a quiet kind of clarity. Taylor didn't feel confused anymore. She felt still. And for her, stillness had always meant something serious was about to change. Her best decisions were made in silence. Not rage, not reaction. When Taylor went quiet, she listened better. To herself. To what she'd already known but hadn't admitted. Now, she knew two things with certainty. Callan hadn't meant to hurt her. But he had. And pain that wasn't meant still leaves bruises. She didn't reach out to him that day. Didn't open his messages. Instead, she filled her planner with meetings and tasks. Anything to move time forward. But in between those moments, flashes came back. Not of him. Of Avan. That tiny baby's eyes. The pacifier. The weight of his body cradled in Callan's arms like he'd been doing it forever. A man who once said he wasn't sure if he wanted kids, now moved like someone who had changed without telling her. She couldn't ignore how natural it looked on him. Not performative, not unsure, real. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table sketching color blocks for her newest client's meditation space. Soft grays, dusty sage, light wood tones. But her mind wasn't on the lines. It was on what it meant to be left out of someone's most life-changing moment. How it steals something you didn't know you needed to witness. The choice, the conversation, the ability to say, I'm here, I'm in, I want this too. But instead, she had been denied that. Not because she wasn't ready, but because he had decided that for her. The next day, she went to her therapy appointment. Her therapist, Nadira, was a quiet woman in her 60s who wore colorful scarves and asked questions that always got under your skin gently. Taylor hadn't told her about Callan before, but today she did. She explained the whole timeline. The love, the silence, the photo, the baby, the confrontation, the confession, the visit, the gift, the texts, the walk-by encounter. Nadira listened closely, only scribbling notes occasionally. When Taylor finished, she asked, what hurt more, that he had a child, or that he thought you couldn't handle it? Taylor looked at her for a long time, then said quietly that he made the decision for me. Nadira nodded. You're someone who creates safe spaces for others, and yet the one you loved most didn't invite you into his. That sentence held her breath in place. After the session, Taylor drove to a park on the west side. She didn't walk. She just sat in her car, watching families pass by. Strollers, laughing kids, two dads walking twin girls in matching overalls. She didn't feel envy. She felt something more complicated, displacement. Like she had been meant to be a part of something, but missed the moment it unfolded. She reached into her glove box, pulled out the small photo book she kept of her favorite project installations, and opened to the page with the children's reading corner she'd designed 2 years ago. Soft rugs, custom cubbies, woven chairs low to the ground. She remembered how proud she was of that space, of how the kids touched everything, like it belonged to them. That's what she'd wanted with Callan. Not marriage on a schedule, just belonging. Her phone buzzed. A new message from Callan. Avon stood for the first time today. It was clumsy, but he laughed when he fell. I thought of you. She read it. Didn't reply, but she held her phone to her chest, just for a moment. The next morning, something in her shifted. She didn't want answers anymore. She wanted understanding. There's a difference. Answers explain. Understanding heals. So she texted, when's his next checkup? Callan replied within seconds. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Midtown Pediatrics. You don't have to come. But I'd be grateful if you did. She stared at the message, then closed her phone. She'd decide in the morning. When morning came, she stood by her closet for too long, unsure of what to wear. She wasn't dressing to impress him, but she didn't want to look like she was barely holding together either. She chose soft denim, a warm blouse, flats, something simple, like how they started. She didn't text to confirm. She just drove, and when she arrived at the clinic, she parked across the street and waited a moment to breathe. When she stepped out of her car, She felt her palms sweat. Not from fear, but from realness. This wasn't a date. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a new kind of moment, undefined, but important. She walked into the waiting area, looked around, then spotted them. Callan in the corner, holding Avon in one arm, bottle in the other. He looked tired, focused, gentle. He looked up, saw her, and didn't smile. But his eyes did something softer, something she couldn't name. He stood, adjusted Avon, no words yet. She stepped closer. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he replied. They both looked down at Avon, who blinked at her with sleepy curiosity. "He just woke up," Callan said. "I see that." There was a pause. Then Taylor extended her arms slowly. "May I?" Callan blinked, then nodded, and placed his son into her arms. Avon stared up at her, fingers twitching, lips puckered slightly. He didn't cry. He just studied her like she was something safe he vaguely remembered. Taylor rocked him gently. Her arms instinctively adjusted. "He's heavier than I expected," she whispered. Callan's voice was soft. "He eats like it's a competition." She smiled. They both did. The nurse called their name. Callan took him back, but when he returned to the waiting room 20 minutes later, he found Taylor still sitting there, waiting. No expectations, just there. And for Callan, that meant more than anything he could say. The pediatric clinic had that usual weekday rhythm, the sounds of faint cartoons playing on a TV, the soft tap of parents scrolling their phones, the light fussing of infants still adjusting to the fluorescent light of morning. Taylor remained seated long after Callan took Avon into the back with the nurse. Her hands were folded, resting over the curve of her purse. She wasn't tense. She was steady. She was letting herself be there, in that moment, without deciding what it meant. Sometimes healing meant showing up before the answers arrived. When Callan returned carrying Avon again, he didn't speak right away. He simply sat beside her, adjusting the baby's head against his chest. The child was half asleep, eyes fluttering. "He didn't cry," Callan said finally. "Not once." She turned slightly toward him. "You're good with him." "I'm trying to be." Every day. A beat passed. Then, "Thanks for coming." "I didn't come for you." He nodded. "I know." She looked at the baby, his tiny socks mismatched. One navy, one white. She smiled faintly. "You dressed him today?" "Yeah. You can tell, huh?" She chuckled under her breath. "The socks." He laughed once, quietly. That laugh, it felt different now. Less restrained, less calculated, almost warm. They walked to the parking lot in silence. She noticed he didn't try to walk too close. He gave her space, but not distance. At her car, she turned. He stopped a few steps back. "I still don't know what I want," she said, eyes on him. He didn't interrupt. "But I know I don't want to disappear from his story." Callan's throat moved. "I would never let that happen." Taylor shook her head. "It's not up to you anymore. If I show up, it'll be because I choose to, not because you let me." Callan nodded. Slowly, respectfully, she added, "I'm not ready to forgive you, but I'm also not angry anymore. I wouldn't ask you to rush either." She unlocked her door, placed one hand on the handle, then paused. "What's he like in the mornings?" Callan smiled, this time without hesitation. "Hungry, loud, then weirdly calm, like he's waiting for the world to prove itself." Taylor tilted her head. "Sounds familiar." Callan grinned. "I wonder where he got it." She slid into her car, buckled in, and pulled off. But in the rearview mirror, she saw him still standing there, holding the baby, not chasing her, just waiting, letting her go, not to lose her, but to prove he knew she could come back when she was ready. That night, Taylor called her older brother. He answered on the second ring. "Still breathing?" He joked. "Deeply," she replied. He caught the shift in her tone. "You saw him?" "Yeah." There was a pause. And the baby didn't cry." Her brother chuckled. "You know that's not the real question." Taylor exhaled. I know. Do you still love him? She looked at her ceiling fan again. That old familiar swirl. I never stopped. I just needed him to tell the truth before I trusted it again. Over the next few days, her life returned to its structure. Design meetings, site visits, late-night sketch sessions. But now, her mind didn't spin in circles. It walked in straight lines. She didn't cry. She didn't fantasize. She didn't cling. She just processed. And quietly, a new thought took shape. Maybe healing wasn't about waiting to feel ready. Maybe it was about showing up even when you weren't. On Friday, Callan texted again. Avon's getting a new crib tomorrow. I'd love your opinion. She replied after 15 minutes. Send photos. Not trying to give him a backache. He sent 2 links. She replied with one word, nope. Then a second message. If you're going to do this, don't do it halfway. Buy something he'll still fit in 6 months from now. Callan noted. A few hours later, would you want to come with us? Taylor stared at the message for a long time, then typed, where? Saturday, she met them at a family-run boutique just outside Atlanta. Callan had texted her the address, said nothing else. When she arrived, they were already inside. Avon was sitting upright in a shopping cart, chewing on the cardboard tag of a stuffed giraffe. Callan looked up and saw her. He didn't smile this time. He just said, he's been chewing this thing like it owes him money. She laughed. And without hesitation, she reached for the cart handle. Let me push. They spent the next 45 minutes trying out cribs, mattresses, and mobile attachments. Callan asked her opinion often. Taylor didn't hold back. This is too flimsy. That's not baby safe. Look at the slats. Please don't buy one with plastic drawers. What are you, 15? He took it all in, laughing, nodding, learning. She realized something halfway through. He liked being guided. He wasn't defensive. He didn't pretend to know it all. He wanted to learn, not just about Avon, but about how to do this part of life well, the part he almost shut her out of. When they checked out, the store owner asked, "Are you 2 first-time parents?" Callan glanced at Taylor. She didn't correct her. She just looked at Avon and said, "First crib." And the woman smiled. "You picked a good one." Outside, Callan placed the boxes in his trunk, then turned to Taylor. "I meant what I said. I want you in his life, in whatever way you choose." She nodded. "I know." He opened the back door to adjust Avon's car seat. The baby was falling asleep already, toy giraffe still clutched in one hand. Taylor leaned slightly toward the open window. "Sleepy, huh?" Callan smiled. "You wore him out." She stood there for a moment, watching Avon breathe, watching the rise and fall of his tiny chest. How peace lived in that child's face, despite all the chaos that brought him here. Then Callan said, "You want to ride back with us?" Taylor looked at her car across the lot, then back at him. "Yeah. I'll follow behind." She didn't need to rush, didn't need to define anything. But that night, when Callan texted, "He loves the giraffe, won't let it go," attached, Avon asleep in his crib, giraffe in hand. She replied, "He's got good taste." And this time, she added a smile. Have you ever forgiven someone quietly, without words, without applause, just by showing up differently? If you believe trust can be rebuilt, not with promises, but with presence, like this video, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more stories where healing speaks louder than betrayal. Taylor never expected to feel at ease again this soon. But strangely, that Saturday lingered in her mind like a warm hum. There had been no grand confessions, no "we talk," no subtle pressure to define what was happening. Just her, Callan, and Avon, walking through a baby store, cracking jokes about giraffe teethers and mattress covers. And when she left, there was no guilt, no questions hanging in the air, only a soft sense of, okay. She still didn't know what it all meant, but she knew it didn't feel like pretending anymore. On Monday morning, she walked into her design studio earlier than usual. She set her phone face down on her desk, not to avoid anyone, but to stay in her own mind, just a little longer. Her assistant, Rhea, peeked her head in. "You slept, huh?" Taylor smirked. "Why?" "Because you're wearing earrings." "That's how I know." She chuckled under her breath. "Don't start. Just saying. Whatever piece you're drinking, I want a sip." Taylor turned back to her screen. "It's homemade. Takes time." Rhea tilted her head, studying her boss, then nodded as if satisfied. "Good. You deserve time." Around noon, her phone buzzed. She ignored it for an hour. When she finally checked, it was a message from Callan. Avon started waving at his reflection. For 10 straight minutes. "I think he thinks he has a twin now." Attached, a 9-second video. Avon, seated on a blanket, waving at a mirrored closet door, laughing each time. Taylor watched it twice, maybe 3 times, but she didn't reply, not because she was shutting him out. She was learning to let moments sit. Not everything had to be answered immediately. Some connections breathed better with space. That evening, she cooked for herself for the first time in weeks. No microwave, no leftovers. She sliced peppers, crushed garlic, measured rice by instinct, not habit. While the pan sizzled, her mind drifted, not to heartbreak, not to suspicion, but to memory. One quiet night, a year ago, when Callan had come home late from a flight, she was in the kitchen, half asleep on the couch. He'd walked in, kissed her forehead and said, "I missed your stillness." Back then, she thought he meant comfort. Now she wondered if he meant truth. The next day, she was heading out of a site meeting when her phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. An hour later, she checked the message. "Hey, it's me." Pause. "This isn't about checking in. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of how you handled all this. You didn't fold. You didn't lash out. You protected your peace. I don't know many people like that." He cleared his throat. "Anyway, that's all. Just wanted you to hear it." "Bye, Tay." She sat there for a long time, just holding the phone. And when she pressed delete, it wasn't because she wanted to erase it. It was because she didn't need to replay it anymore. She'd heard every word. Wednesday, she dropped off a care package at her niece's daycare. Books, puzzles, and a few items she picked up randomly while shopping. On her way out, she passed a woman with a toddler on her hip, struggling with a stroller. Taylor stepped in without asking, held the door, adjusted the latch. The woman smiled, winded. "Thanks. These little ones are heavy, huh?" Taylor smiled. "Yeah, but worth it." She walked to her car and sat still. That comment had come out of her mouth like it belonged to her, like she knew. And in a way, she did now. Later that week, Callan texted, "We're going to the botanical gardens this weekend, first stroller outing. Want to come?" She didn't respond right away, not because she was unsure, but because she smiled so hard her phone nearly slipped from her hand. It was the first time she didn't hesitate. She typed, "Yes. Just tell me what time." That Sunday was cool but sunny. Callan wore a denim jacket and pushed the stroller like he'd been doing it all his life. Avon wore a bucket hat and kept pointing at things that didn't need pointing at, a bench, a duck, a leaf. Taylor walked beside them, hands in her coat pocket. Every so often, Callan would glance sideways, not in that needy way, but in a grateful one, as if he was checking that this was real. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk about the future. They talked about Avon's laugh, about which trees had the most bees, about how no one tells you that diapers have a fragrance scale, normal things, things that meant they had returned to the ground, no longer floating in uncertainty. When they reached the Japanese garden section, Taylor paused in front of a small wooden bridge over shallow water. Callan stopped beside her. "Quiet. I've been here before," she said. "With me?" "No. Before you. Before a lot of things." Callan nodded, watching her face. "I came here once when I thought I'd never want kids," she added. "What changed?" She turned to him. Time, trust, and loss. He waited. She didn't elaborate, but he understood. Avon babbled. through his pacifier. They both reached for it at the same time. Their hands brushing, they looked up. Neither moved away. They stayed at the garden until sunset. Back at the car, she helped buckle Avon in, adjusted the hat that had slipped sideways. When she turned, Callan was watching her. No expression, just watching. "Can I ask something?" he said softly. "Depends." He paused. "Would it hurt you if I said, 'I wish this was our normal again'?" Taylor looked at him for a long time, then said, "No. It wouldn't hurt, but it has to become again. You can't just pick it back up." "I know." She stepped back, closing the door gently. "I'm not saying no," she added. "I know that too." They didn't hug, didn't kiss, didn't promise. But when she got home that night, she opened her closet and moved the black hoodie Callan had left months ago. From the back of the hanger to the front, Taylor used to think closure came in conversations, final talks, goodbyes with punctuation, an apology sealed with tears. But lately, she learned closure sometimes came when someone said nothing, and still showed up differently. That next week, Callan didn't text every day. He didn't flood her phone with pictures or reasons to reconnect. He gave her space, not distance, and it made all the difference. Wednesday evening, she heard a knock at her door just before sunset. Not rushed, not desperate. She opened it slowly. Callan stood there, a folded box in hand. Simple, clean. "No pressure," he said. "Just something you mentioned once." She raised a brow. "What is it?" "Open it." Inside was a ceramic diffuser, white, minimal, elegant. She stared. He added, "You once said lavender helped you sleep. Figured you might have stopped using the one in your studio." Taylor blinked. She had forgotten she'd even said that. It was nearly a year ago, during one of their late-night conversations. He remembered. She stepped aside. "You hungry?" His eyes softened. "Always." They didn't talk about their relationship over dinner. They didn't talk about what they were or weren't. Instead, they ate quinoa bowls and swapped stories about childhood hobbies. Callan admitted he once collected rocks. Taylor teased him. "Of course you did. You probably labeled them and ranked them by how serious they looked." He laughed, eyes crinkling. "You're not wrong." She hadn't seen that laugh in a long time. Not the careful one, the real one. After clearing the dishes, she handed him a towel. He dried. No assumptions, no lingering, no reaching across the counter. He simply helped. And when it was time to leave, he didn't ask for more. He just picked up his keys and said, "Thanks for letting me in." She nodded. "Thanks for not trying to fill the silence." "I don't want to fill it," he replied. "I want to make room inside it." That stayed with her after he left. Thursday morning, she dropped by the boutique shop that sold handcrafted children's items. She hadn't planned to buy anything. But as she walked past a display of hand-knit blankets, she paused. There was a deep forest green one, soft, warm, the kind of texture you only bought for someone you didn't want to forget. She bought it, no card, no name, just a note in the bag. For the nights when the world feels too loud. She didn't text him about it. She left it with the front desk of his building, no signature. But that night, when she got home, her phone lit up. Callan, he fell asleep on it. Just like that. Photo, Avon curled up on the blanket, 1 foot out, pacifier in. Taylor didn't respond. She just saved the photo. The days grew slower. They weren't in a rush. Neither of them was trying to define what this was, but they both felt it, the rebuilding. Not from scratch, but from respect. Sunday came with cool air and soft clouds. Callan asked if she'd like to join them at the library. Avon loved the puppet show sessions in the kids' corner. Taylor said yes. It was her first time watching Avon in a space filled with other children. He didn't speak yet, but he babbled with animation, pointing at the colorful characters on stage, clapping out of sync with the rest. She couldn't help smiling. Callan glanced over. "He does that because he thinks he's the one making them move." She whispered, "You sure he's not?" Callan's grin widened. "Don't feed his ego." They sat like that for another hour. Not a couple, not strangers. Just safe again. On the way out, Avon dropped his teether. Taylor bent to pick it up. As she straightened, she noticed Callan watching her. Not intensely, gently. She tilted her head. What? He shook his head, voice low. Nothing. Just, you're different now. Different how? He paused. More you. She didn't reply, but her smile said everything. That evening, they sat on the couch at Callan's place while Avon dozed in his room. Callan poured tea. Taylor sipped. You used to think I wanted everything perfect, she said. I did, but I didn't. I know that now. She leaned back. You thought I couldn't handle what was messy. He looked down at his hands. I thought the mess would scare you away. She studied him. But it wasn't the mess. It was being left outside of it. Silence. Then he said something she didn't expect. I was raised to fix everything before showing it to someone. Taylor's eyes softened. Callan continued. When I realized I couldn't fix this, I shut down. I told myself if I could just protect you from it long enough, it would go away. But it didn't. And I hurt you, she whispered. And I would have helped, if you'd asked. I know that now. He met her eyes. I know a lot now. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't try to close the space, but she leaned her head to the side, and it rested gently on his shoulder. For the first time in months, she let herself breathe next to him without preparing for disappointment. That night, before leaving, she walked into Avon's room for the first time. It wasn't overly decorated, just clean, warm, real. She stood quietly over his crib, watched his chest rise and fall, and whispered, "Sleep well, little truth." Taylor didn't say it out loud, but she felt it. Something had changed, not in the loud romantic way stories often promised, but in the quieter way real life moved. A shift in how she walked into rooms, a softness in how she now looked at Avon, a stillness in her chest that used to be full of questions. For weeks now, she'd been watching more than speaking, observing the man she once thought she knew completely. And every time Callan showed up, without pressure, without performance, she saw something new. Not a man trying to fix the past, but a father trying to get the present right. It was the following Friday evening when she stopped by again. She hadn't planned to stay long, she had client reports to finalize, but Avon was still up, and Callan texted that he was fighting sleep with a vengeance. When she arrived, the apartment smelled faintly of cocoa butter and baby shampoo. Avon was on the floor, sprawled like a tired sea turtle, holding onto the corner of the forest green blanket she'd given him. His pacifier dangled from his mouth, barely holding on. Callan looked up from the kitchen, wiping his hands with a dish towel. "He's refusing to tap out," he said. "I've tried music, bottles, guilt." Taylor smiled as she knelt beside the baby. "He's got your stubborn. He's lucky it looks cuter on him." She touched Avon's back gently. The little boy looked up, blinked twice, then reached for her necklace chain with half-closed fingers. Her chest pulled a little at that small, familiar gesture. "I'm guessing you haven't eaten," Callan said from behind her. "I brought my laptop," she replied, not answering the question. He chuckled. "I'll take that as a no." Within 15 minutes, they were sitting at the small dining table, Avon finally asleep. Soft white noise coming from the baby monitor. Taylor's laptop was open but untouched. She watched Callan move. The way he brought out a tray of roasted vegetables and brown rice. Nothing fancy but intentional. "You cook now?" she asked. He smiled, trying not to rely on takeout and hope. She nodded. "That used to be your main food group." He leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle. "I'm different now, Tay." "I know," she said. "I see it." That quiet acknowledgement made his shoulders drop. Not from defeat, from release. He didn't need to earn every part of her trust in one dinner. He just needed to keep showing her that he wouldn't hide anymore. And he was. After dinner, she helped him tidy up the kitchen. There was music playing softly in the background, something acoustic, slow. He handed her a glass to dry and said, "I think about that night a lot." Taylor didn't need to ask which night. The photo? She asked. He nodded. That moment you saw me. I knew then I'd lost something I didn't know how to keep. She looked at him. You didn't lose me. You just didn't invite me in when it mattered. I know. Silence stretched for a few seconds. He added, I didn't know how to be vulnerable without looking weak. Taylor folded the towel in her hand. Telling the truth doesn't make you weak. But choosing silence over trust, that makes you alone. Callan nodded slowly. And I was, he said, even when I was holding him, even when I was doing the right things, I still felt like I was failing because you weren't there. Taylor glanced toward the hallway where Avon slept. Her voice softened. You've changed. Callan met her eyes. So have you. They didn't finish that conversation. It didn't need an ending. Sometimes healing didn't mean circling back. Sometimes it just meant sitting with each other and feeling the silence was different now. Not sharp, not tense, just open. Before she left that night, she peeked into Avon's room. He was curled on his side, hugging the blanket she bought, one sock missing, a tiny crease between his eyebrows. She stood there a moment. Callan whispered behind her, he sleeps better when he knows someone's near. She didn't respond. But she didn't walk away right away either. She simply stayed. The next morning, Taylor woke up feeling something unfamiliar. She didn't feel pulled. She didn't feel conflicted. She felt included, not officially, not by title, but emotionally. She felt like she'd stepped into a space that didn't ask her to shrink or prove herself, a space that just opened. Later that afternoon, her niece's birthday party took up most of her schedule. Balloons, icing, sugar highs, parents chatting about kindergarten applications. But even in the middle of the chaos, her mind returned to one quiet image. Avon, asleep on that green blanket, thumb pressed into the corner. That baby didn't ask for anything, but something in him made her want to give, not because she owed it, because it felt right. On Sunday, Callan texted again. We're doing a quick grocery run. You up for a tag-along? She replied, meet me at the market on 12th. It was a small neighborhood market, local-owned, quieter than the big chains. When she pulled up, Callan was already outside, stroller in hand, Avon, bundled up in a zip hoodie and socks with tiny cartoon dinosaurs. The minute the baby saw her, he squealed, an actual sound, full of recognition. Callan looked stunned. That's the first time he's done that. Taylor bent down, touched Avon's knee gently. Hey there, little one. You remember me? He reached toward her necklace again. Same gesture, same soft grip. Inside the market, they moved like they'd done this before. Taylor read labels. Callan pushed the cart. Avon chewed on a silicone teether and babbled at passing fruit stands. There was nothing forced between them. No performance. No discussion about what this is. Just rhythm. At the dairy aisle, Callan picked up oat milk, then paused. Didn't you used to hate this brand? I've grown. He smiled. Me too. At checkout, the cashier looked at them, then at Avon, and smiled. How old is your baby? Before Callan could answer, Taylor said calmly, He's 10 months. It slipped out. Instinctively, the woman nodded. He's precious. Y'all are doing great. They both thanked her. No corrections. No awkward explanations. They walked out in silence. But it wasn't heavy. At the car, Callan loaded the groceries. Taylor adjusted Avon's hat. I wasn't trying to speak for you, she said. Callan shook his head. You didn't. You were speaking with us. She looked at him. You're okay with that? His voice was low. I want that. She stood back. Let the moment settle. Then nodded once. Back at his apartment, Avon refused to nap. They tried soft music, warm milk, a dark room. Still wide awake. So Callan finally said, "Want to take him for a walk?" They bundled up. Stroller out. Park nearby. Taylor walked beside him as Avon kicked his feet inside the stroller, humming to himself. Callan exhaled. I don't know what this is between us right now, but I like it. She didn't interrupt. I don't expect it to be what it was. I don't need to rush. But having you around, Feels like something I don't want to lose again. Taylor kept walking, then said, then don't lose it. Keep showing up. Callan nodded slowly. That I can do. They stopped near the small pond. Avon was finally asleep. His head tilted, mouth open, pacifier resting on his chest. Callan lowered the stroller shade. Taylor crossed her arms. Do you still think about what you should have done differently? She asked quietly. Callan looked out over the water. Every day, even now. He nodded, especially now. Because I see what I could have ruined if I hadn't stopped lying to myself. She turned to him. I was never asking you to be perfect, just honest. I know that now. He glanced at her. I still don't deserve the grace you're showing me. She didn't look away. You're not getting grace. You're getting my choice. And I don't give that lightly. They stood there for a while, wind brushing over them, Avon snoring in rhythm with the wind chimes from a nearby porch. Taylor finally said, Let's take him home. Callan replied, You mean our stop or yours? She raised an eyebrow, then smiled. Let's see if he makes it home awake first. The following week, Taylor did something she hadn't done in over 2 months. She invited Callan to her space, not for a conversation, not to talk about Avon, but simply to exist around her again. Her home wasn't big, but it had always been her haven, soft-toned walls, shelves of books, warm lighting that dimmed just right at night. Callan had once said being in her apartment felt like walking inside a slow breath. She hadn't let him cross the threshold since the day she walked away. But now, it didn't feel like reopening a wound. It felt like allowing new soil to be turned. When he arrived, he held nothing. No flowers, no wine. Just Avon in one arm, a small canvas bag with a pacifier and travel blanket tucked inside. Taylor opened the door before he knocked. You're early, she said. I didn't want to be late. She stepped aside. Come in. Callan walked in like he remembered the rhythm of her place. Slow steps, quiet glances. Avon looked around, wide-eyed, absorbing the light, the shelves, the calm. Taylor reached for him. You remember me? Avon grinned, clapped his hands, and made a soft buh sound. I'll take that as a yes, she said, smiling. They settled on the couch. Avon crawled between them with a toy that jingled. Callan sat back, one hand resting on his knee, the other open, unsure. This feels strange, he admitted. Strange good or strange let me leave. Strange like, I didn't think I'd ever be invited back into this room. Taylor looked at him. This isn't about returning, it's about rebuilding. He nodded. I can live with that. She offered tea. He accepted. While the water boiled, Avon crawled after her, pulling at the hem of her shirt like she was already his. When she turned, he lifted both arms. She picked him up without hesitation, held him while pouring hot water into mugs. The teabag string brushed against his cheek, and he giggled. Callan stood at the doorway, watching. You're a natural, he said. No. I'm willing. That matters more. Back on the couch, they talked about everything but them. Avon's latest sleep regression. A new client of Taylor's with no spatial awareness. Why baby socks never stay on. They laughed easily. And then, without warning, Taylor said, I think you panicked. Callan looked over. She continued, back then, when she dropped the baby off, when you realized your life had changed. I did, he said. No hesitation. I panicked because everything I thought I had control over vanished. And instead of reaching for someone, you locked the doors. He nodded slowly. You were the only person I would have trusted with it, but I couldn't imagine giving you that burden. You don't get to decide what I can carry. I know. She looked at him. You cost us something, Callan. I know that too. But here's what you didn't ruin, she added, her voice quiet but firm. You didn't ruin the part of me that still believes in showing up. He didn't reach for her hand, but he whispered, Thank you for that. Avon eventually drifted off to sleep on the couch, mouth slightly open, curled into the blanket she once picked out. Callan glanced at the clock. I should probably take him. Taylor looked down at the sleeping child, then at the room, then back at Callan. He can stay. she said. You both can. If you want. He looked stunned. You sure? She nodded once. This is your rebuild. I'm just letting you try. That night, she gave them the guest room, set fresh sheets, found an extra pillow, moved her old white noise machine from the storage box in the hallway. When Callan walked in with Avon cradled in one arm, he paused at the doorway. This used to be your design room, he said. It still is, just with different purpose. He looked at her. Thank you, Taylor. For not asking me to beg. She met his eyes. I didn't need you to beg. I needed you to be different. He didn't say goodnight with a hug. He didn't lean in or ask for more. He simply carried his child into the room and closed the door gently behind him. Taylor woke just after 6 a.m. She wasn't used to noise in the morning. Her apartment was usually silent at that hour, her days starting slow with lemon water and a few deep breaths by the window. But today, there was life in the hallway. Not loud, just soft thuds and one giggle that escaped under the door crack. She slid on a robe and padded quietly into the kitchen. Callan was already there, standing at the counter in a t-shirt and sweats. Avon perched on his hip, chewing the corner of a silicone spoon. You're up early, she said. Callan turned, eyes alert but warm. He's a 5:40 a.m. kind of guy. No one voted on it. Taylor chuckled. Must get that from your side. Avon reached for her instantly, arms lifted like he expected her to respond. She didn't hesitate. She took him, balanced his weight on her hip, and pointed toward the banana on the counter. You hungry, little one? He made a sound. Not quite a yes, but close. Callan reached for a bowl. I was going to mash it for him. Want to do it? Taylor smiled. Sure. She grabbed a fork and started. 10 minutes later, Avon sat in his booster seat at the kitchen table, smacking on banana mash while Callan poured 2 mugs of coffee. The morning light spilled through the windows. No tension, no pretending. It didn't feel like something they had to perform. It felt like something they could maintain if they were careful. I meant to ask, Taylor said, stirring honey into her drink. Do you have a custody hearing scheduled? Callan nodded. Preliminary hearing is in 3 weeks. Final isn't until the following month. She hasn't made contact again. Not since the day she left him. His voice held no bitterness, just fact. Taylor let that sit, then asked, what will you do if she does? Callan paused. I'll fight for him, but not in a way that destroys her. I just want what's stable. Taylor nodded, respecting that answer. Later that morning, Callan began packing Avon's things. Taylor stood by the door, watching him tuck the blanket and pacifier into the bag like he'd done it 100 times, efficient, careful, present. She remembered the man who used to live from meeting to meeting, everything revolving around work. This Callan was slower, but more focused, centered. I can drop him off, she offered, surprising herself. Callan looked up. You sure? She nodded. It's not weird, not anymore. He zipped the bag and handed it over. Thank you, he said. For yesterday. For this morning. You're welcome. He paused at the door. Avon blinked up at her over his father's shoulder, then reached again. I think you're his favorite now, Callan joked. I'm not mad at that, she replied softly. As she closed the door behind them, she didn't feel a pang. She felt calm. There was no regret in letting him in, no shame in asking him to stay, and no fear in watching him go, because the difference now was they both knew the way back. That night, she sat on the couch with her laptop open but untouched. She kept thinking about the way Avon had reached for her, about how he hadn't cried when Callan left the room, about how he leaned into her shoulder like it was already familiar. That kind of trust didn't come fast. It came from presence, from remembering, from repeating, from quiet proof. Callan sent a short video after 8 p.m. Avon was wobbling between the coffee table and the couch, arms out like a tiny tightrope walker. First 3 steps. I didn't even get to catch him. He caught himself. Taylor typed, He's steady. Callan replied, Just like someone else I know. She didn't write back, but her fingers rested on the keyboard a while longer than usual. The next morning, she received an unexpected delivery at her office. A single package, no name, no sender. Inside, a framed photo. Avon, mid-step, mid-laugh, in motion, blurry but bright. And below it, a line engraved at the bottom of the frame. Some first steps are taken quietly, but they still change everything. Taylor held the frame against her chest, and this time, she let herself cry. Not because she was sad, but because she knew now she wasn't rebuilding from ruins. She was walking towards something that had learned how to survive the fall. Taylor hadn't been to the gallery in almost 6 months. Not since the last installation she curated, before everything shifted, before the photo, before the silence. But when her friend Danny called to ask for help setting up a new exhibit on architectural emotion through space, Taylor said yes without hesitation. She needed it, the balance, the structure, the reminder that stillness could be beauty. The gallery smelled like fresh paint and slow jazz. Workers buzzed past her with ladders and crates, but Taylor moved calmly, sketchpad in hand, marking where the floor lighting would land and which corners needed texture. It felt good to be back in a space she could shape. Predictable, safe, until she heard a child's giggle echo off the walls. It was faint, small. She froze mid-step, then heard it again, soft laughter, followed by a quiet voice she knew better than she wanted to admit. Her pulse skipped. She turned. There, near the far wall, crouched near a sculpture, was Callan, holding Avon's hand as the little boy reached for a hanging fabric display. He hadn't seen her yet. She took a breath, steadying herself, then walked forward. Callan looked up just as she approached. There was no surprise in his face, no awkward flinch, just a slow nod, as if he already knew she'd be here. "Tay," he said. She looked at Avon, who was now blinking at her like he was trying to place her. "You weren't supposed to be here until later," she said softly. "Danny invited me," Callan replied. "Said it was open viewing hours for family." Taylor's brow raised slightly. "I didn't know I had a family slot." Callan didn't react, but Avon waddled forward and latched onto her leg without hesitation. Her hands hovered a moment. Then she bent, scooped him up, and rested him on her hip. He fit naturally, like this wasn't something they were still getting used to, like this was his place too. "Are you mad I brought him?" Callan asked after a moment. Taylor shook her head. "No, I'm surprised. That's different. He's been curious about spaces. I thought maybe letting him explore something you made would mean something." That caught her off guard. "You brought him here. For me?" Callan nodded. "For us." They walked in silence for a moment, side by side, as Avon rested his head on her shoulder. The space was quiet now. The workers had gone on break. Just the sound of soft jazz and the distant buzz of fluorescent lights remained. "I forgot how good this feels," she said. Callan looked over. She clarified, building something. Being in control of the lines, the light. He smiled faintly. "You've always been good at shaping the world around you." She paused. "Not always." He tilted his head. "You're thinking of me. I'm thinking of us." She walked toward a display wall, layered with pieces of raw wood. One beam burned slightly, another polished smooth. She stared at it. "I was so sure of everything back then," she said. "You were right to be." She turned to him. "Were you afraid I'd leave?" Callan nodded. "Yes." "Because I would have left if the roles were reversed." Taylor blinked. "That's honest. I've had time to figure out what honesty actually means." She lowered her voice. "And," he met her gaze, "it means telling the truth before someone finds it on their own." Avon shifted in her arms. She adjusted him without thought. Callan smiled at the gesture. "You look good with him," he said. "I feel calm with him," she replied. "Even now. Especially now." They stood there for a few more minutes, saying nothing else. But in that silence, something softened. Not everything was healed, but something real was unfolding. Not forced, not chased, just quietly, becoming. After the gallery cleared out, Taylor stayed behind with Callan and Avon. She didn't ask why he lingered. She could feel the reason in how slowly he moved, placing Avon's jacket on the bench, scanning the photos on the wall like they held answers to questions he hadn't spoken aloud. Avon sat in the center of the room, stacking blocks Danny had left from a family play exhibit. And then he said it, plain as a breeze. "Mommy has a picture of this." Taylor turned. "What picture, baby?" Avon tapped a block. "Of you and Daddy and me. On the wall. She hides it when he's coming." Callan froze. The words landed like stones. Heavy. Immediate. Taylor crouched down beside him. "What did you say, Av?" He held up a block proudly. "This one's blue." "You like blue." "Avon. The picture. When did you see it?" He didn't answer right away, but the innocence in his eyes was undeniable. "Mommy showed it to me," he said finally. "She said you were a secret." Callan looked like something had cracked open in him. He sat on the bench behind them, head down, jaw tight. "That's what she meant," he murmured. Taylor stood slowly. "What? Who meant?" "Her mother," he said. "She said Avon's mind wouldn't hold on to memories long, but if he ever asked to say, 'I made the choice.'" Taylor blinked. "You didn't?" "I never got the choice, Tay. I didn't even know about him." He looked at Avon again. "Until you did." The silence returned. Not awkward, just deep. Taylor sat beside him now, her voice quieter. "She tried to erase me." Callan nodded. "And Avon's beginning." Taylor shook her head. "But she failed." Avon built his tower again, unbothered by the weight around him. Callan spoke softly, like he didn't want to scare the moment. "She said she wanted to protect him. That the world I came from wasn't meant for kids. She wanted quiet, order, normal. And you were, what? Disruption?" "I was her threat. You were the danger she couldn't control." Taylor looked at him. "She told you that." He met her eyes. "She screamed it at me when I showed up with the DNA results." The words sat between them like a knife, but there was no blood. Not anymore. Taylor stared ahead. "And still you come here. Still you bring him to me." Callan let out a slow breath. That sentence hit her hard, not because of the words, but because of the truth under them. This wasn't about him redeeming himself. It was about her refusing to be erased, and him respecting that. Avon walked over with his wobbly tower, grinning. "I made it for you." Taylor took it carefully. "Thank you, sweetie." He turned to Callan. "Can she come with us today?" Callan hesitated, then looked at Taylor. "Would you?" Taylor's voice was soft. "You mean it?" "I mean it." She stood slowly. "Let me lock up." They left the gallery together. 3 figures. No label yet, but forming, becoming something only they would understand. And for once, Taylor didn't need answers. She just needed the ride. What would you do if the person you love chooses silence over truth? If you believe the truth always finds its way, no matter how buried like this video, comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories where power shifts quietly, but completely. Early morning light filtered through the blinds when Taylor opened her eyes. She reached for her phone out of habit, but the screen stayed dark. No messages, no notifications, just quiet. A full inhale. She sat up slowly, took a steady breath. Today felt different, not heavy, not haunted, just possible. She showered, dressed in a soft blouse and jeans, simple, comfortable, authentic. She paused for a moment, almost backhanded, when she realized she wasn't preparing for work or for a date. She was preparing for a coffee. No strings. The cafe was quiet. Early hours. She picked the corner booth by the window, the one she used when she sketched client designs over lattes. She ordered her usual, vanilla latte, oat milk, 2 pumps, just the way she liked it. She opened her sketchbook, but the pages stayed blank. Instead, she sipped her coffee, let the warmth settle in. She thought about the last few weeks, about Avon, about Callan, the softness in his father's smile, the shake in the baby's fingers when he'd reached for her necklace. Her heart didn't flutter with hope. It just hummed, a soft tap tap on the table pulled her out of thought. She looked up to see Callan standing there, carrying 2 cups, 1 vanilla latte with oat milk, 1 black coffee. Hers. He didn't smile in a dramatic way, just nodded, quietly. "You remembered," she said, reaching for the cup. He sat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. Avon was safe with a trusted caregiver. No rush. "Thanks for coming," he finally said. She watched steam swirl up from her mug, then looked at him. "I wasn't coming for you," she said softly. "But maybe for him." Callan nodded. "I'm glad you didn't decide yet whether this is us. I just wanted you here." She considered that, sipped her coffee. The taste was familiar, comforting, honest. They talked about small things first, the cafe's new pastry menu, the weekend weather, how her studio projects were going. Nothing heavy, nothing forced. Then Callan paused. "He's been reaching milestones," he said. "First baby-proof lock installed. First time he laughed, real laugh." Taylor's chest moved with a slow breath. "That's good. He asks about you sometimes," Callan added. "I tell him you're a friend." She nodded. "That's fine." Silence settled between them again. But it wasn't awkward. It was gentle, comfortable. She closed her sketchbook, looked out the window at people passing by. Life in motion. "Do you want to try again?" she asked, quietly. He blinked. "Try what?" "Us. Not the us from before, but something new." He didn't answer at once. He set down his cup, then looked at her directly. "I want that," he said. "Only if you do." She nodded. "I'm not promising forever." He smiled, a small, honest half-smile. "Then, I'll start with today." They left the cafe together. No declarations, no promises. Just 2 people walking side by side, leaving footprints that weren't heavy, but might last. Callan's car ride home was quiet. No music, no calls. Just the hum of tires on asphalt and the sound of his own thoughts breathing slowly. He glanced at the car seat behind him. Empty now, but filled with a kind of calm. The meeting with Taylor hadn't resolved anything. And yet, it hadn't broken anything either. He parked in the driveway, unbuckled, and stepped into the house. The caregiver met him at the door with a smile. "He just went down for a nap," she whispered. He nodded, walked past the soft-lit hallway and into the nursery. Avon slept soundly in his crib, hands balled into tiny fists, blanket tucked under his chin. Callan sat beside the crib and just watched, not as a billionaire, not as a man fixing his past, just as a father. He remembered something his own father once told him: "You don't protect what you own. You protect what you love." He'd owned a company, owned homes, jets, boardroom power. But this small boy, he loved. And Taylor? He had to learn how to protect that love without controlling it. Across the city, Taylor was folding laundry when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, no message, just a ping. She didn't open it. Instead, she called her mother, talked about nothing. Then everything. It felt light. She hung up and walked to her balcony. The December air was sharp, clean. She wrapped herself in a blanket and stared out across the rooftops. Her mind played Callan's voice again. "Only if you do." For years, she'd chased clarity, labels, definitions. But now, something else mattered more, her own peace. She made a cup of chamomile, no sugar. Then she opened her messages. It wasn't Callan. It was a design firm in Seattle, offering her a remote contract. Her portfolio had made its way to someone's desk. She smiled. She didn't have to choose today. But knowing she had options, real, earned ones, shifted something inside her. A few hours later, Callan texted her. "Callan, he rolled over today, then tried to roll back and got stuck. Looked very confused. Taylor, baby logic, gravity's betrayal." He sent a photo, a van on his belly, arms spread like a tiny superhero, his face half pout, half proud. She didn't reply, but she saved the photo. The next morning, she stopped by the house. not to talk, not even to see Callan, just to sit on the nursery floor and let Avon crawl across her lap and fall asleep on her chest. Callan watched from the hallway. He didn't interrupt. He only whispered, "Thank you," before walking away. And for the first time in a long time, Taylor didn't flinch at someone leaving the room. She felt still. Taylor didn't knock. She didn't have to. The front door was already open, just slightly, like someone had stepped out for air and left a piece of their life behind. Callan stood by the kitchen island, a glass of water untouched in his hand. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, collar loose, but his posture was tense. When he turned and saw her, his whole body softened, not dramatically, but enough that she noticed. "Is he up?" she asked. He nodded. "Just finished his snack. He'll fall asleep again if you blink too long." She smirked. Typical. They walked together toward the playroom. Avon was there, gripping the edge of a foam block, wobbling like he owned the world. Taylor knelt beside him, offering her finger for balance. He took it with determination and pride, and she laughed. "That's my boy." Callan sat across from them, quiet, watching. A question hung in the air, one that hadn't been asked in weeks. "Taylor," he said suddenly, "if you want to move back in, we can figure out space." She looked up, blinking slowly. "That's not what I came here for. I know. I want to say it before I talk myself out of it." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Avon, who had just plopped onto his bottom with a confused thud. "You know why I left?" she asked quietly. Callan's jaw tightened. "Because I lied. That's part of it. But it was more than that." She turned to him now. "It wasn't the lie that broke me. It was that you made decisions for 3 people and carried the weight alone, as if I couldn't help you hold it." His eyes met hers. "I thought I was protecting you." "I didn't need protection. I needed partnership." That landed. She picked up a toy giraffe and handed it to Avon. He grinned, then bit it. Callan finally spoke again. "I didn't know how to be that. I grew up watching men make decisions and women adapt. I thought that was strength." "It's fear," Taylor said, her voice low but steady. "Fear of being seen, of not being in control." He nodded slowly. "I see that now." The room fell quiet, just Avon's babbles filling the space. Then she said it, softly, like a breath she'd been holding too long. "I'm not asking for a redo. I'm asking for a new way forward, slower, clearer, and honest. Even when it's hard." Callan leaned back. "Then that's what we'll do. Not a promise, not a plea, just agreement." They stayed like that, in the same room but not rushing, not defining. For the first time, neither was trying to win, or prove, or fix. They were just there, and for now, that was enough. Later that evening, after Avon had fallen asleep, Taylor stepped onto the back deck of Callan's house. The sky was bruised with navy and deep grey, stars barely poking through. Cold air brushed her skin, but she didn't move. She heard the sliding door open behind her. Footsteps. He didn't speak, just stood nearby. "I never hated you," she said, still facing the trees. "I know." She looked over her shoulder. "But I didn't trust you either." Callan nodded once, accepting it like a sentence he deserved. "You don't get to rebuild trust by saying you're ready," she added. "You prove it in the quiet moments, in how you respond when I hesitate, in what you say when no one's asking you to explain." "I've been reading," he said softly. She turned now, raising a brow. "About emotional maturity," he went on. "What it means to carry things with someone instead of for them. About control and fear." A pause. "And I've been talking to Marcus." Her eyes widened slightly. Marcus was his older brother, the one who had disappeared from all their lives for 2 years and returned only last fall with a fresh start and a different tone. "Didn't think you two still spoke." "We didn't. Until I realized I'd become the father we had growing up, cold, avoidant, high-functioning, but emotionally absent." She stayed still, listening. "I didn't know how to say sorry to you because I hadn't said it to myself first," he continued. I was ashamed of what I'd become. She walked toward him slowly. That's the first honest thing you've said that I didn't already have to discover on my own, she said. He didn't flinch. She looked up at him. I'm not moving back yet. I didn't expect you to, but I am willing, she said, stepping even closer, to see who you are now. And if that man can make space for who I've become, he held her gaze. I can. I'll be the judge of that. He smiled faintly. Fair. They stood like that. No physical contact, no sudden reconciliation, but something warmer than forgiveness moved between them. Not romance, not yet, but something more useful. Clarity. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded paper. What's that? He asked. Avan's next pediatric appointment. You'll be there. He nodded. Of course. She handed him the paper. His hand grazed hers. She didn't pull away, but she didn't linger either. Taylor turned to go back inside, but then paused at the doorway. One more thing, she said. Yeah? Next time, don't leave the door open. Not unless you're absolutely sure who you're letting in. He swallowed. And this time, she added, I let myself in. Then she walked inside. Callan stood there on the deck, holding the paper, holding himself steady. Because for the first time, she didn't slam the door behind her. She'd left it open, just a little. Monday morning came with sun that didn't match the tension in Callan's chest. He stood in front of the mirror in his office, buttoning a navy shirt, his jaw tighter than usual. Today wasn't just a board meeting. It was the meeting, the one where his ex-partner Royce would attempt to seize control, using months of silence, subtle votes, and Callan's personal chaos as leverage. Except Callan wasn't coming alone, and he wasn't coming unarmed. Downstairs, Taylor stood at the entryway with Avan on her hip, dressed in his school uniform. She handed him off to the housekeeper, nodded at Callan, then followed him to the car. You sure you want to do this? He asked once they were inside. No, she said, but it's necessary. He looked over. You don't have to protect me. I'm not, she replied. I'm protecting the future I want our son to grow up in. If that still includes you, it'll be because you earned it. The silence was firm, not cold. She added, also, Royce isn't just after your company. He's after the entire foundation, your work with foster youth, your tech scholarships. He wants control of the brand, not the mission. Callan's hand tightened on the gear shift. And he thinks because you've been off balance personally, the board will vote to remove you, she said. He exhaled slowly. They might. She turned to him. Not if you show up with something bigger than anger. He looked at her. What? Truth. At the building, they entered through the private elevator. Taylor wore a muted grey suit dress, hair pulled back, lips calm. She looked like she'd never left. In the boardroom, Royce was already seated, flanked by two of the newer board members. They smirked when they saw Callan and Taylor walk in together. Royce stood. Wasn't expecting your company. Callan didn't smile. She's a consultant now. Taylor pulled a file from her bag. Shall we begin? The meeting started formally. Updates. Performance numbers. Then Royce steered the conversation toward a vote of confidence. In light of Mr. Callan's recent personal distractions, Royce said smoothly, I move. We initiate a leadership transition, effective immediately. This isn't about punishment, it's about stability. One board member nodded. Another looked unsure. Callan stayed quiet. Taylor stood. Before any votes, I'd like to submit this. She placed a folder in the center of the table. Inside, a report showing Royce had funneled marketing funds into a shell company owned by his cousin in Arizona. She waited. No one moved. Each page is dated. Traced. Verified, she said. He's been redirecting company money under the guise of brand elevation. I'm sure the audit committee will love the full version. Royce's face dropped. Callan spoke for the first time. If you want to talk about stability, how stable is a man under federal investigation? A silence louder than shouting followed. Royce began to stammer. This is a setup. It's math, Taylor replied. And signatures. The paper doesn't lie. The chair of the board cleared his throat. We'll adjourn briefly and review this documentation. Royce stormed out. No one followed. Callan looked at Taylor. You planned this? She nodded. You built something real. I won't let someone break it out of spite. He stared at her, then said quietly, I think I'm starting to see who you've become. She didn't smile. Good. Because I'm not going backward. Outside the conference room, the board filed out in silence, the weight of consequences trailing behind them. Royce wouldn't recover from this, but that wasn't the story. The real shift happened between the silence, where trust was tested, and power, real power, was restored quietly, in the hands of someone who never chased it, only guarded what mattered. The air outside was crisp. Winter hadn't fully arrived in Chicago, but the chill in the wind had started whispering its warnings. Callan stood in front of his car, staring at the building behind him, the place where he'd nearly lost everything. Not just his company, not just his public image, but the core of who he was. Taylor stood next to him, not hand in hand, not with hearts rushing to reconnect, but beside him, steady, present, strong. You didn't have to do all that, he said again. No, she replied. I didn't. He let out a breath. So, why did you? Because I know what it means to build something no one thinks you deserve, she answered. He looked at her, eyes softer now. You never wanted power, did you? She shook her head. No, I just wanted dignity. For me, for Ivan, for you, even if you didn't always see it. He swallowed hard. I see it now. She nodded once. I know I failed you, he added. In 100 ways. You did, she said. But this isn't about guilt. He turned to her fully. Then what's it about? It's about what you do next. Her phone buzzed. A message from the sitter. Avon had been picked up from school, fed, and was asking if he could bring his dinosaur to Daddy's house this weekend. She didn't answer yet. Instead, she looked at Callan. You have a second chance, she said. Most men don't get that. He looked at her carefully. Do we have a second chance? She didn't speak right away. Then, after a beat, she replied, That depends. On what? On if you know the difference between loving someone and owning their silence. He blinked slowly. She stepped closer. You never needed to prove you were powerful, she said. You only ever needed to prove you were safe. Those words cracked something. Not loud, not visible, but deep. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. It was the toy she had returned to him, the miniature wooden lion she carved by, hand when they were both broke and living in a one-bedroom with broken heat. He'd kept it all this time. He placed it in her hand. This was never mine to keep, he said, but I never let it go. She stared at it. You told me back then I was the lion, he added. But it was you. Still, she didn't smile. Not yet. But something in her eyes softened. A cab pulled up. She started to step away. Taylor, he said quietly. What now? She paused. I'm going home. Alone. He nodded slowly. But I'll think about this, she added. About all of it. He exhaled. She opened the car door, then paused again. Turned back. Their eyes met. Her lips moved. 3 simple words. I see you. And then she stepped inside and closed the door. Back at her apartment, Taylor stood by the window, watching the snowfall begin. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She stood still. There had been pain, betrayal, silence, and strength. But through it all, she had protected what mattered. Her dignity, her son, her future. And she had offered one final mercy. Space for a man to redefine his legacy. Not by force, but by choice. She picked up her phone, typed something. 3 more words. Final message to Callan, I accept. Quietly, they called her weak when she stayed. They called her bitter when she left. But no one called her what she truly was, powerful. Not because she raised her voice, but because she knew when to walk away in silence. Taylor didn't scream. She didn't destroy. She didn't expose. She simply lived in her truth, raised her son with pride, and protected her peace. And when power circled back asking for forgiveness, she didn't fall for words. She watched for action. And that's what true dignity looks like. Not loud, not violent, but earned. If this story moved you, if you believe that quiet strength is still strength, if you believe that dignity doesn't need permission, then, like this video, leave a comment. What would you have done in her shoes? Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more real, powerful, emotionally rich stories that hit deep. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, because sometimes the strongest thing a woman can say is nothing at all.